My name is Caleb Morgan. Today I want to tell you my story about betrayal that came from the last place I ever expected, my own family. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and comment below where you're watching from. I'm in my early 30s and I used to think that trust was the heart of any strong relationship. For years I worked as a technical project lead at a cloud software firm based in downtown Crestwood. The salary was more than enough to support a quiet life in a Midtown Hills apartment. From the outside, everything looked like a picture-perfect dream. I was engaged to Amanda Price, the woman I believed was my soulmate. And my bond with my father, Henry Morgan, was the kind sons only hope for. He was my role model, my backbone, the one who showed me that values meant more than money. Henry was in his 60s, a well-known property consultant with decades of respect in the Crestwood market. He and my mother, Linda, had been married for what felt like a lifetime. Their marriage was my standard for love. Dad was the kind of man who still held doors open, kept his promises, and cheered at every baseball game I played as a kid. When I introduced Amanda to him a couple of years ago, he welcomed her like family, treating her as if she were the daughter he never had. Amanda, also in her early 30s, worked as a campaign assistant for a creative agency downtown. She was sharp, charming, and loved the same simple joys I did, road trips to Northfield and arguing over who made the best deep dish pizza. We first met at a 4th of July barbecue hosted by a mutual friend, and within 3 months, I knew I wanted forever with her. She got along great with my parents, often joining us for holiday meals and Sunday dinners. My mom adored her. And Dad? He'd always say how lucky I was to have found someone like her. We had our wedding planned for a Saturday in late autumn. The ceremony was booked at Trinity Hill Chapel, and our reception would follow at Grandview Ballroom. We'd sent out invitations to 150 guests, family, close friends, and co-workers. Every detail had been planned, from the old-fashioned whiskey table to the classic live band. My best man was Jason Reed, a former co-worker. Amanda's sister, Rachel, was her maid of honor. The practice ceremony dinner was scheduled at Brennan's Prime Grill, and we'd already secured an oceanfront suite in Hawaii for our honeymoon. The night before the wedding, I was staying at Kingswell Grand Hotel with my father. We were finishing up last-minute ceremony details while Amanda and the bridesmaids were at a separate hotel, sticking to the old tradition of staying apart. Dad and I ordered room service and sat in the bridal room reviewing the guest list and seating chart. It was one of those peaceful father-son moments I imagined I'd always remember. Around 10:30 that night, my father stepped out to use the bathroom, leaving his smartphone on the table beside his teacup. I wasn't trying to pry, but a text alert lit up his screen. My eyes glanced over without thinking. That's when my stomach dropped. The message was from Amanda, sent around 10:30. It read, "Thank you for the unforgettable night, Henry. The way your lips explored every part of me won't leave my mind. I can't wait for the next time. You're incredible. P.S. Our story will be our secret." Attached was a photo, a clear, intimate image of the two of them in what looked like a hotel room. Based on the lighting, the timestamp, and everything else, it had been taken just before midnight the night before. In one instant, everything shattered. I was supposed to marry Amanda in less than 12 hours. The woman I'd trusted most had been with my father, and the man I looked up to, the man my mother still adored, betrayed us both in the most personal way possible. I sat frozen, staring at that screen like watching myself from the outside. My hands were trembling, but my thoughts were steady. This wasn't a slip-up. This was planned. The metadata on the photo confirmed the time, just before midnight. The same night I'd been at Harlan Stadium with my groomsmen, watching the local baseball teams play, raising a toast to what I thought would be the happiest day of my life. By the time Dad returned from the bathroom, I had already snapped multiple photos of his phone screen with my own device. Years of experience in tech had taught me one important rule: always back up your evidence. I kept my voice calm as I told him I was tired and needed rest before the big day. He gently patted my shoulder and said, "Sleep well. Big day ahead." The bitterness in that moment was hard to hide. Once Henry left for a separate room in the hotel, I just sat there, stunned. Everything was crashing down around me. I started remembering the little moments from the past few months that hadn't made sense at the time. Amanda working late more than usual, claiming her agency had landed high-profile campaigns. My father suddenly taking frequent trips to Brookshire for property opportunities. At dinners, they'd sometimes share glances, private jokes, or laugh at things no one else understood. Then, there was the new scent she wore often. The same one Henry had complimented far too eagerly. I'd ignored all of it. I trusted them blindly. In my line of work, spotting broken patterns is second nature. But in my personal life, I had missed the most obvious flaw. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about a carefully kept secret built on lies. And I was supposed to walk into marriage completely unaware. I didn't explode. I didn't cancel the ceremony. Instead, I made a choice. They were going to think they had gotten away with it until the exact moment I exposed them in front of everyone. My job had trained me to think ahead, to plan precisely. So that's what I did. I spent the next 3 hours creating my strategy. First, I uploaded the photos from Henry's phone to a secure cloud drive. Then I built a basic web page to host the evidence, the images, the full message thread, everything. I made sure the site could handle a lot of traffic. After that, I generated a scan code that would lead people straight to it. The design looked completely harmless, like a link to wedding photos or a digital keepsake link for our guests. Using the hotel's guest office room, I printed 200 small cards, each with the scan code and a message. Scan for a special surprise from the bride and groom. In today's world, everyone wants exclusive content. I knew guests would be curious, and most wouldn't resist scanning it. The cards looked sleek and professional, like something you'd find in modern wedding gifts. Next, I picked up the phone and called Olivia Grant, my longtime attorney. It was nearly 2:00 a.m. She still answered on the third ring. Even though it was the middle of the night, Olivia listened carefully as I laid everything out. When I finished, she took a breath and said, "Caleb, I'm sorry this happened, but I'm proud you're staying clear-headed. Don't sign anything tomorrow. And what you're planning, it's perfectly legal. The content is yours. So is the moment. You have every right to reveal the truth." She also told me to keep everything time-stamped and backed up, and offered to attend the wedding herself, quietly sitting among the guests as legal support if things turned chaotic. "Sometimes," she said, "truth does more damage than revenge ever could." I barely slept. But when morning came, a calm I didn't expect settled over me. I showered, put on my custom-tailored black suit, and stared at myself in the mirror, oaked steady, focused. This was the moment my years of crisis-solving would finally mean something personal. When I got to Trinity Hill Chapel, everything was exactly as we had planned. The flowers were flawless, the music was gentle, guests were arriving in elegant clothes. My mother, Linda, looked stunning in navy blue, completely unaware her life was about to be upended. Henry played his part well, smiling, shaking hands, cracking light jokes about the weather and football season. Amanda walked in, wearing her expensive designer dress, her hair curled, glowing like the perfect bride. She leaned in and whispered, "It's finally happening." The audacity was mind-blowing. Just over a day ago, she was in a hotel room with my father, and now she stood inches away from me, ready to make promises she'd already broken. As we stood at the altar, I glanced at Henry. He was sitting front row in his best suit, smiling like nothing had happened. Then he gave me a thumbs up, the same gesture he'd given when I finished at Sterling College. And I knew. He still believed I had no idea. I remembered the way Henry had reacted when I got my first promotion, or when I told him I was going to propose to Amanda. His words, his pride, it had all been a lie. But I stayed composed. Everything was moving according to plan. The ceremony began with the pastor's traditional welcome. I could feel the weight of 150 eyes fixed on us. Amanda's family from Northfield was there. So was my extended family, colleagues from both our companies, and old friends we'd collected through the years. Jason Reed, my best man, stood beside me, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. Rachel Price, Amanda's sister, stood proudly as maid of honor, glowing with joy that wasn't real. Meanwhile, Paula Knight, our wedding coordinator, was already moving through the pews. She had worked many ceremonies at Trinity Hill Chapel and had a solid reputation for keeping things private. I had told her the scan cards were part of a surprise gift reveal at the reception. She believed me and agreed to hand them out quietly during the early part of the service. It was the perfect time. Guests were still settling in, and most were curious enough to check their phones, but respectful enough to keep them on silent. From the corner of my eye, I watched as Paula made her way down the aisle, giving out the small cards in clusters. Uncle Terry was one of the first to scan his. I watched his face change, from mild interest, to confusion, to full-blown shock in just seconds. Cousin Nicole read the screen and covered her mouth. My boss from the cloud software firm, Elliot James, turned pale. He showed his phone to his wife, who let out a quiet gasp. The ripple moved fast, a chain reaction of stunned expressions and whispered disbelief. Phones lit up all across the chapel. People were nudging their neighbors. Those who hadn't received cards were being handed phones by the ones who had. But the service didn't stop. The pastor kept speaking about love and trust while the guests around him were absorbing proof of betrayal. I noticed Amanda's Aunt Marla showing her screen to Amanda's mother, who let out a faint cry and covered her face with a handkerchief. My mother, Linda, was sitting in the front row with a gentle smile. When Nicole passed her a card, she scanned it casually. Her expression shifted in an instant. From warmth to a shattered expression I will never forget. Amanda was still facing forward, listening to the pastor talk about sacred vows and eternal promises. She had no idea that the room behind her had already changed. Henry, seated just a few feet away from her, started looking uneasy. He glanced around, noticing the movement, the quiet murmurs, the sideways glances. He leaned over to whisper something to my mother. She pulled away sharply, tears now streaming down her face. Then came the moment I had prepared for. The pastor reached the part of the ceremony where he asked if anyone had a reason this union should not take place. I stepped forward and gently took the microphone from his hand. The chapel went silent. You could hear nothing but the hum of air and the pounding in my chest. I looked at Amanda, then at Henry, then at the guests, every one of whom had just seen undeniable proof of what they'd done. Actually, I do have something to add, I said, my voice firm and steady. Amanda turned to me, confused at first, then slowly horrified as she realized something was deeply wrong. Her eyes searched the crowd behind her and saw the stares, the whispers, the phone screens. Henry shifted in his seat, visibly trembling. His face was pale and full of dread. I loved you, Amanda, I began. I gave you everything I had. I believed in us. Then I turned to my father. And you, Dad. I looked up to you all my life. You were the one who taught me right from wrong, the man I wanted to become. The silence was thick. Even the kids had stopped fidgeting. Everyone was listening, frozen in their seats. But the deepest betrayal, I continued, deserves the highest cost. I paused. Let it sink in. Last night I found out that the two people I trusted most had been lying, cheating, and standing here today, they were ready to complete that lie in front of everyone we love. Amanda opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Henry stood up, his hands shaking, but he said nothing either. My mother couldn't hold back tears anymore, not just from pain, but from the public disgrace playing out in front of every familiar face she knew. The evidence, I said, is clear. You chose to turn this sacred day into a lie, so I chose to reveal the truth. Right here, where you thought I'd be blind. I raised my hand slightly and gestured toward the crowd. Nearly everyone in the chapel was holding their phone, staring at the same undeniable proof. Messages, photos, timestamps, all of it, crystal clear. The wedding is over, I said calmly, and so is my relationship with both of them. Then I turned and walked down the aisle. The reaction behind me was instant. Guests started shouting questions. Amanda broke into loud sobs. Henry tried to push through the crowd to reach me, but I didn't stop. I kept walking, my head held high, leaving behind the two people who had crushed my trust and torn apart my family. Outside, the late autumn air felt sharp but refreshing. For the first time in weeks, I could actually breathe. I paused on the steps of Trinity Hill Chapel. Inside, I could still hear the chaos. Amanda crying uncontrollably, Henry shouting excuses nobody believed, and Linda being held by her sister, unable to speak. Guests were pouring out. Some followed me, offering quiet support. Others formed small groups, whispering about what they had just seen. Jason Reed, my best man, caught up to me. His face was pale, stunned. "Caleb, I don't even know what to say," he muttered. "How are you holding up?" I looked him in the eyes. For the first time in a long while, I didn't have to lie. "I'm better than I've been in months," I said. Truth hurts, but it also frees you. By the end of the day, the story had already exploded. Guests had shared the scan cards and screenshots online. By Sunday night, it was trending on social media platforms. By Monday morning, local news in Crestwood had picked it up. And by Tuesday, I was getting calls from national outlets asking for interviews. I declined almost all of them. I did speak briefly to a journalist from the Crestwood Daily Herald, someone who had covered business pieces about my company before. I kept it short. "I believe people deserve honesty," I told him, "especially when trust is what's at stake." The fallout came fast and hit hard. Amanda was fired by the creative agency downtown. Their brand centered around integrity and strong family values, and her presence became a problem they couldn't ignore. Henry's property consulting business collapsed even faster. His career had been built on personal relationships and reputation. Within days, major clients canceled deals. His business partner of 15 years walked away. And my mother, Linda, she filed for divorce within 2 weeks. During one of our quiet conversations, she said something that stuck with me. "I could have maybe forgiven a private mistake," she told me, "but not something this cruel. He was ready to let you marry her, knowing everything." The legal side of things moved quickly, thanks to Olivia Grant. Since the marriage was never finalized, there were no divorce papers between Amanda and me. Still, we had to handle financial matters. I had paid for most of the wedding, the venue, catering, even the honeymoon suite. We couldn't recover all the money, but Olivia helped negotiate enough to ease the loss. More importantly, she made sure Amanda had no access to my accounts or future assets. The prenup had been rock solid, but because the wedding never happened, it didn't even apply. What mattered was, I was free, emotionally and financially. The weeks that followed were strange, quiet yet loud with reflection. I took a short break from work to gather myself and to escape the noise around me. Thankfully, my company had my back. Elliot James, my manager, pulled me aside one day and said, "You handled it with strength. Not everyone could have stood up like that." A few months later, something unexpected happened. I got a job offer from a startup in Clearview, Texas. It came through a professional contact, and the timing felt right. I needed a new place, a new start, somewhere far from the whispers and looks. The role came with a big salary bow, and a chance to lead projects in advanced analytics systems. Before leaving Crestwood, I had one final interaction with Henry. He had been calling for weeks, but I never answered. Then, one quiet Saturday morning, he showed up at my condo. He looked older, worn, like someone who had lost everything. "Son," Henry said quietly, standing in my doorway, "I know I can't fix what I've done, but I need you to hear it. I'm sorry. I ruined everything that mattered, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I looked at him. The man who'd once been my role model now looked smaller, like someone crushed by his own choices. What I felt in that moment surprised me. Not rage, not even disappointment. Just pity. "Dad," I said, "I forgive you. Not because you've earned it, but because carrying this weight around is exhausting. I've got better things to do with my life." He didn't speak again. He just nodded, slowly, and turned to leave. Half a year down the line, I was living in Clearview, Texas. Settled into my new role as division head at a startup, I was working on projects that challenged me and building new routines with people who only knew me by the name I gave, not the past I left behind. I had started dating again, but slowly, cautiously. I wasn't in a rush to trust, but I wasn't closed off either. That experience had reshaped me, sharpened how I read people, how I listened to what wasn't being said. That awareness helped me both in life and at work. Through Linda, I learned that Amanda had moved back to Northfield to stay with her parents. And Henry? He'd taken a job as a junior sales associate at a small real estate office in a nearby suburb. Their affair had ended almost right after the wedding disaster. Turns out, whatever they thought they had couldn't survive the truth. Not under the eyes of everyone who once respected them. The scandal that brought them together also destroyed them. Back in Crestwood, people still talked about what had happened. My decision to expose the truth became something of a local legend, a wedding story that spread far beyond our circle. But I didn't dwell on it. I had moved on to better things, bigger things. And the betrayal that once felt like the end of my life, it turned out to be the beginning of one that made more sense, one I controlled. Sometimes, the worst chapters force you to write the best ones. In time, I realized that betrayal doesn't end your life. It just ends the chapter you thought would last forever. What followed wasn't easy, but it was honest. There were moments I missed the people they used to be. Memories don't vanish just because the truth shows up, but I stopped letting those memories hurt me. I learned to remember without reopening the wound. I started building new routines, waking up in Clearview, pouring my own coffee, heading into a job where no one looked at me with pity, only respect. I started sleeping better, breathing easier, laughing again. I didn't need to erase the past. I just refused to live in it. Some scars don't fade, but they stop bleeding when you stop picking at them. Amanda and Henry became a cautionary tale in my rearview mirror, not a sentence I had to keep reading. And me? I became someone stronger than I ever expected. Not in spite of what happened, but because I survived it. That was my story. And even now, some moments still echo in the quiet parts of me. If you've ever faced something like this, or if it made you feel something, tell me what you would have done. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story hit home, go ahead and subscribe. Because the next story, it might just change the way you look at trust, love, or even yourself.